This week on the podcast, we're going to talk about a really important idea. It's something that I think we need more of in the world right now, and that is the ability to have an open mind, an open heart, and listen as someone who has an open mind and an open heart. And we're going to talk about why that matters. I'm going to talk about how to do it. I'm going to talk about what you can expect and how it can impact your life by being open-minded and being open-hearted, if you will. And I think it's going to be really, really incredible. So I want to welcome you back to the Aha Moments. I'm Elliott Connie, and this is where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And I want to tell you, so in order to be a good leader, and I mean that in like leader in your employment, leader in your field, leader in your home. In any aspect of leadership, you have to be someone who is open-minded and you have to be someone who listens, because you cannot grow unless you are open-minded. Like, you cannot become whatever it is you endeavor to become unless you have an open mind and an open heart. And I want to talk to you about something that I did. I'm actually not super proud of this. It's a kind of an embarrassing thing, but I'm going to tell you how being open-minded and having an open heart made a difference for me. So I ended up in a position where I was in a significant position of leadership in my field and in my company. And we decided to host a conference. And it was a huge financial risk. Like, hosting a conference in my field is a really expensive, financially risky thing to do. I wanted to make sure the event was financially successful. So I reached out to some of the people in my field and invited them to be speakers. And I purposely reached out to people in the field who had big followings, because my thinking was, if the people who came to lecture at our event had big followings, then they're more likely to get people to sign up for this conference, and thus it would be financially successful. Like, I wouldn't lose my money or I wouldn't lose everything in this conference. And it turned out that all of the people who I had invited were men. So we invited 4 people, and it turned out that all of them were men. And there was a woman who worked for my company who voiced to me that that was inappropriate and she wouldn't want me to go forward if everybody at the event were men. Now, I consider myself a very strong feminist, and I consider myself a very strong feminist even then. So I responded in a defensive way, if I'm being very honest. And I said, but I didn't pick them because they were men. I picked them because they had big followings, and we needed to have an event that was financially successful. So I had to get people that had big followings. And this woman said to me, but Elliot, one of the reasons why all of the men in the field have big followings is because the women don't get the same opportunities as the men got. And I thought about that, and I thought, you're right. When you have an open mind and an open heart, you're able to say to people, you're right. The thing you just said impacted me, and I need to adjust what I'm doing and adjust what I'm thinking. When you have a closed mind, you become stubborn, and you become defensive. And I thought, you know what? You're right. So instead of thinking about my own needs financially and I need to hire people who have big followings, I started thinking about I want to invite people to this event based upon the message they carry. So we came up with a new list. We came up with a brand new list that was based upon what people were saying and what I wanted to be promoted at our conference. And that ended up actually completely ironically 2 men and 2 women. And the event was a huge success. We've now done that event annually, and it was a massive, massive, mega success. And some of the women that we gave airtime to, that some of the women that we hosted at our event over the years have now gone on to have massive followings. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of, is that our event has not just been successful financially, but it has also been successful in the social justice impact in our field. But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't listen with an open mind to something someone was saying that was different from what I was thinking at that time. So I need you guys to really understand that some people are going to tell you what it's like to be different. They're going to tell you what it's like from their perspective. They're going to tell you how what you're doing is impacting them. And it may not sit well with you at first. It may not feel nice at first. It may not feel comfortable at first. But you have to be able to be open-minded and listen to other people's experiences and allow it to impact you. Allow it to make a difference in your life. Allow it to help change the direction that you're headed in. So I want to invite you to think about when are times in your life when you had to be open-minded and someone else was saying made a shift in what you were thinking and doing and impacted how your life was going. Thank you so much for being here today. This podcast is growing so much, and I just want to say thank you for that. So please continue to share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, wherever it is you listen to your podcast. Happy Monday, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow. Being closed-minded often has consequences, in some cases societal consequences, and today I'm going to talk about a bit of a controversial topic actually, but I want to talk about it anyway because it's important and it matters, and I think it's causing issues in our society. So we're going to dive deep into a meaningful but controversial topic, and I hope you'll understand what I mean and why I think this matters so much. I'm Elliott Connie, and I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk to you about the idea of closed-mindedness, like when you just won't listen to other people's opinions or perspectives. And the greatest act of kindness is actually simply the act of listening. And I think the greatest example that I see of that happening currently that actually causes me a great level of concern and fear is what's going on about what we refer to here in America as critical race theory. And in schools, they are no longer allowed to talk about the racial discrimination and the civil rights movement and some of the things that have happened here in America in race relations and some of the things that happen in discrimination. And I think the worst thing that happens in society is when you take away someone's voice. And I think it's so important that we're able to talk about our perspectives and how they matter. Now, the justification often given is we don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, so we're not going to talk about America's history of poor race relation. And I'm like, but when you're closed-minded, you don't learn. And when you don't learn, you repeat more mistakes. You know, I have been to the town where Emmett Till was murdered. Emmett Till was murdered in 1955. It's a very common story. Most people know it, what happened to him. I've been to the riverbank where his body was found. I've seen the industrial fan where his body was tied to. I've seen the look of the people's eyes in that town. That is not something that should be repeated. We need to make sure that we are being open-minded enough so that we can learn how to ensure that that level of hurt, discrimination, oppression, murder, systemic trauma does not happen again. Now, that's just one example, but I can think of so many others. Because when you are not open to learning new experiences, you miss opportunities to grow. You miss opportunities to change. You miss opportunities to become the very best version of yourself. And I think that's our responsibility. And we have to do that systemically, but we also have to do it personally. When someone shares something with you to give you the opportunity to grow, it's important that we're open and minded enough to hear it. Sometimes being open-minded and allowing somebody to share something with you, it's such an act of kindness because you give their voice meaning and value. I think the worst thing, I know I just said this, but the worst thing we can do is take away people's voice and communicate to them that they don't value to us. And I think we're doing that to a whole race of people here in America that cannot talk about their history. A friend of mine has a daughter, and she was in school, and there was this African-American kid in the school asking the teacher about a particular civil rights leader. And the teacher said, "I cannot answer that without being fired." And it just broke my heart to hear that, because here we are in a place of education, a place of higher learning, and the students are being told that they can't learn. In a place of learning, they're being told that they cannot learn. It was heartbreaking. It was absolutely devastating and heartbreaking for me to hear that. But I think that's an example of how when we are closed-minded, we're not learning. And I think the greatest thing we can do is learn. I think the most valuable thing we can do is learn. The most valuable thing we can do is we can share our perspectives with other people and get other people's perspectives. I think that's the kind of society that I would love to live in. And I think that's the kind of society that would be honoring other people and creating more value. So anyway, I think that's important. So I know some of that is kind of hard stuff, but I think it's important. So that's what I wanted to talk about. If you wouldn't mind, I want to ask you to think of a time in your life when you were maybe a little closed-minded. Maybe you were listening about how some other group or race or religious or whatever was experiencing things. And think about how that might have hurt that group and what progress we can make to become more open-minded as a society and you as a person. Thank you very much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And if you could, please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that at Apple Podcasts and Anchor and Spotify and just all of the places where you can hear podcasts. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So this week in the podcast, we're talking about open-mindedness. And today I want to get into how do you become more open-minded and allow being open-minded to make a positive difference in your life. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So how do you actually become more open-minded? How do you expose yourself to new ideas? And how do you allow open-mindedness into your life in a way that will make a positive difference? So I hope I can share some strategies today that are going to allow you to be able to incorporate this into your life. And the first thing I want to tell you is being open-minded actually starts with humility. And I don't mean humility as in like the absence of bragging, but I mean humility as the acknowledgement that I do not know everything. Humility being the acknowledgement that I am a constant learner. Because once you start to acknowledge that I do not know everything and I am a constant learner, you begin to learn from other people's perspectives and you begin to learn what it's like to be another person. You know, earlier in the week, I talked about what it was like when someone had to explain to me that I had an event, that I almost had an event that was just full of male speakers. And I was able to listen to one of my colleagues talk to me about what it's like to be a woman and how it's been hard as a woman to have their voices heard in this male-dominated field and in this profession. And I heard her and I was able to acknowledge in my own life, in my own heart, I don't know everything. As a male, I don't know what it's like to be a female. And I have to be able to learn and then adjust to the new knowledge. I think it's really important that we do that. Like as a black man, there have been times in my life, there have been times in my professional career where it was very difficult to earn the respect and have my voice heard in this very white-dominated field. And I should be able to explain to people what that is like. I remember, so I was experiencing some discrimination in this field in a pretty harsh way. And I had a friend, she was a white woman, and she was friends with the people discriminating against me. And I was trying to explain to her, here's what is happening. And she did not believe me. Until one day it became very overt. In a very public way, someone said some pretty horrible things about me. And it was very, very clear that they were racially driven. And this friend called me and she apologized. And she said, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. And I was frustrated. I said, why didn't you believe me? And she said, because I had never seen those people do racist things. And I said, well, that's because you don't have the perspective to see it. So you have to be able to expose yourself to new perspectives so that you can learn. And I think the second idea that would really help you is to understand once I have new learning, then I now have to take new action. Maya Angelou has a saying where she says, when you know better, you do better. So once I have new information, I have to make decisions and make changes in my life based upon that new information. It is not good enough to now that I have new information to continue forward with the old action. I have to take action based upon what I had just learned. It was really important for me once I had learned new information that I change the gender makeup of the people that were going to speak at my event. it was really important that my friend, once she had the new information about the impact of her friend's behavior upon me, she had to change her action. And to her credit, she did. So it's not just enough to learn more, you also have to do different. It's not just enough to take on more information, you also have to take new action. And sometimes that requires you to be bold. Sometimes that requires you to be vulnerable. Sometimes that requires you to do something hard. Sometimes that requires you to do something uncomfortable. But you have a responsibility when you gain new information to take new action. And I want you to sit and think for a moment about how you will apply these two how-to steps into your life, and how do you think it will benefit you. Thank you so much for being here today. This podcast, it's growing and growing, and we're reaching more and more people, and I have you to thank for that. So please continue to share this podcast on your social media platforms or with someone in your personal life that you think could benefit from hearing this message. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Anchor, just all of them. Please subscribe, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I often say that I have the best job in the world. Being a psychotherapist has been a true honor. I genuinely believe that I have gotten far more in my life than I have given to the clients that I've worked with. The gift they've given me has been amazing. One of them is the ability to be open-minded. I want to talk about how being a psychotherapist has helped me to be open-minded and share this with you because I think it could help you as well. I am your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to welcome you back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very, very best life. Now, when I became a psychotherapist, I was in my late 20s, and to be honest with you, I thought I had life totally figured out. I thought I understood things. I thought I kind of knew who I was. And I thought the assumptions I had about people and the world were accurate. I thought they were grounded. I thought they were true. But I've learned, because I've met with thousands of people from all walks of life, affluent, less affluent, professional, working class, young, old, students, different political affiliations, and sexual orientation. If there's one thing I've learned, is that you have to be open-minded to the way people live their life in order to help them change and grow and feel heard. There are no two people on this planet that are the same, and everybody carries their story with them. And the greatest thing you can do is listen to people's stories, because that's where the magic of that person is. And I'm honestly, I'm not sure that I would have understood that had I not spent so many years as a psychotherapist. I want to talk to you about a couple of situations I found myself in. I remember working with clients that have different political values than I have, and have different needs and wants than I have. And I remember this one guy, it was this couple I was working with, and in order to understand this, I want you to picture like a stereotypical cowboy and his wife. And he was like this big old tough guy, very obvious that he did not want to be in therapy, and his wife had kind of strong-armed him into being in therapy however she had done it. She had told him, come to therapy or else kind of stuff. And he comes to therapy, and as I'm talking to this couple and trying to help them, this man keeps rolling his eyes and sighing and huffing and puffing. It's very clear he was frustrated. The session ended, and I asked if the couple wanted to come back, and I'll never forget, he kind of barked at me, yeah, we'll get back with you. And he took my card and he walked out, and the wife sat in my office saying, I'm so sorry he was so rude. And she wrote the check for the therapy and left. And I never thought I would hear from that couple again, because it was so obvious that the husband just didn't want to participate. And about 6 months later, the wife called and scheduled an appointment, which I assumed was for the couple. And on the day of the session, I walked out into my lobby, and there is the husband, alone. He comes into my office, and he just starts crying. And I asked him, how may I help you today? And he explained to me that his son, so the wife that I met with him is his second wife, and his son from his first marriage had passed away. And he was devastated, and he said, all I could think about was wanting to get help. And I really appreciated that even though I was so rude and didn't want to be in therapy, you never responded to the rudeness. You just stayed in your role trying to help me. And I really appreciate it. So now that this really horrible thing has happened, I think you're the person that can help. And I did therapy with this man for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, whatever it was, to help him get through the grieving process of losing his son. And I remember thinking, like, whatever was his reason for being rude and not excited to participate in therapy is his reason. It has nothing to do with me. And you have to be open-minded to understand that everybody has their perspectives and it drives their actions. I don't have to take it personally. I don't have to engage in it. I don't have to get defensive about it. I don't have to get hurt by it. Everybody's going through life however they're going through life, and it's impacting them in whatever ways that it's doing. And it allowed this man to come back when he really needed help. And he and I developed a really close clinical relationship, and I was able to help him deal with the loss of his son. And the wife later let me know how much she appreciated the work that I did. And, life goes on. But being open-minded basically means I'm just going to acknowledge that you're on your journey. And it doesn't have to be different from mine. And if we disagree, I don't have to take it personally, just you're on your journey. Because I've had to do therapy with people who had different values than me, who had different political ideas than me, who had different life experiences than me. But it's okay, because we're all on our journey. And I think if we can learn to be open-minded about other people's experiences, then I think this world would become a better place. And I'm forever grateful that I got to be a therapist and learn that lesson from the thousands of clients that I worked with. And I truly wish I could individually thank each and every one of them. So I'm going to ask you something hard today. I want to ask you to think about a time where you judged somebody negatively. And given what you've heard me share in today's podcast, I want you to look back and reevaluate that experience and think how you would handle that situation today, and honor that you need to be open-minded and recognize that everybody is walking their walk and they're doing life as best they can, even if they're having a hard moment. Hey, thank you so much for sharing this podcast. This podcast is growing fast, and I know that wouldn't be possible without you, so thank you. Please continue to share this podcast on your social media platforms with at least one person in your personal life that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Anchor, whatever the popular podcast spots are where you listen to your work, to your podcast. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We've been talking about the power of open-mindedness all week, and I really hope that anything I've shared, has made a difference in your life. And today I want to talk to you about one of the most significant examples of open-mindedness that I'm aware of. One of the biggest lessons that I took away as a child. This is what I'm about to share is a very prominent story, or at least it's a very prominent story here in America about open-mindedness and the way it can make a difference in your life. So I hope you enjoy it. Of course, I'm Elliott Connie, and I'm the host of this podcast. And I want to welcome you back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So the story I want to share with you today is about former Alabama Governor George Wallace. Now, George Wallace was a strong advocate for Jim Crow laws, an overt racist, a proud segregationist. He was famous for saying segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. He said that as he stopped black children from going to schools in Alabama, in spite of the Supreme Court saying that the schools had to be desegregated. But of course, that's not what makes this such a story of open-mindedness. What makes it such a story of open-mindedness is he later became what a Washington Post writer wrote as a model for racial reconciliation. And what happened was George Wallace was running for president, and someone tried to murder him. Someone tried to assassinate him. And they shot him. And lots of things happened that I don't have time to go into right now. You can Google this story and recognize that what I'm saying is true. But people visited him in the hospital, including black women. There was one black congressman or congresswoman at the time, and she was running for president, which I actually didn't know that she was running for president at the time, that this lone black woman was running for president. And she went to visit him. She paused her campaign to go visit him in the hospital. Some of his staff was unhappy that she had gone to visit him. And over time, the kindness that this black person showed him caused him to reconsider his racist views and caused his family to reconsider their racist views. And this is now known as a story of racial forgiveness, from the black community in Alabama, from the Wallace family towards the black community in Alabama, and some significant racial healing took place in their lives. Not to say that things are or ever will be perfect, but this story shows that when you have an open mind, meaning you are available to new experiences and the lessons contained within new experiences, healing is possible in a profound, mega, major way. When you make yourself available to these types of lessons, life is forever changed and forever different. It is remarkable what can happen when we allow ourselves to love and to heal and to grow, and we allow our hearts to be available to new lessons and new experiences. And if someone who is the descendant of slaves in a southern U.S. state such as Alabama can open their hearts and minds to new experiences, then I think all of us can. And as I look around the world we live in now, with all of the division going on and with all of the craziness happening, I think if we could use one thing that could make a significant difference, it's true, genuine open-mindedness. And I hope that this week's podcast did at least a little bit to move us in that direction. So I just want to ask you to think and reflect on what you could learn from this story, because I would love to just do one little bit to make this world a little bit more open-minded and open-hearted. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing to help this podcast reach even more people. And if you could keep that up and keep sharing this podcast on your social media platforms with people in your personal lives, it would mean the world to me. And also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts. You can do that on Spotify. You can do that on Simplecast. You can do that wherever it is you listen to your podcast. Have a great weekend, and I cannot wait to see you on Monday.